Hi everyone, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Paula.
And we are naturalists at Mississippi Gateway Regional Park.
We are on the banks of the Mississippi River out here, and if you've ever been walking around, you may have seen something that looks like this.
So that right there is a mussel. And although it's not the most charismatic of animals, they do lead incredibly interesting lives. So for Wildlife Wednesday, we thought we'd tell you a little bit more about them.
So a little bit of information about mussels. They are an animal, but they don't have a brain. However, they still are really important to this river's ecosystem. They are what we call a siphon feeder. And if you get in real close here, you can actually see this one right here has its siphon open. I'm pointing to it right there. And what it's doing right now is it's taking in all the water and it's eating the plankton, and it's actually filtering out everything else that's in the water as well, and then shooting that water back out.
All right, so when we normally think about animals and life cycles, this is where mussels get really interesting. Normally when we think about life cycles, there's kind of two types. There's incomplete metamorphosis, which is what we do. You have a baby, even if it's a live birth or hatching from an egg, doesn't matter. You have a baby, your baby looks pretty much just like you. And then they get bigger, right? That's what we do. That's what a lot of animals do. Then there's also metamorphosis, or a complete metamorphosis. This is what like a butterfly does. Okay, you have an egg, you have a larval stage, you might do some changing during that larval stage, you become a pupa, and then you totally change your body, and then you become an adult. All right, so those are the two stages. Now, that's what most animals follow. These guys have a really weird life cycle, and I'm really excited to tell you about it.
So there are about 12 to 14 different types of mussels just in this stretch of the river alone at Mississippi Gateway Park. Now, what has to happen is that a male of one specific species needs to release its gametes into the water, and hopefully they will come across a female of the same species, and she can create Glaucidia packets. We're going to talk about those in just a second, but this is what a Glaucidia packet looks like. So after the Glaucidia packets have been fertilized, they're going to rest in the female's gills for a bit of time, almost like a gestation period.
All right, so after the Glaucidia packets have had some time to gestate, they are ready to move on to their next stage. So this is where we want to tell you what a Glaucidia actually is. A Glaucidia is this thing. Glaucidia are extremely small. Think about the size of a piece of sand. All right, so these Glaucidia look just like the adults for the most part. All right, this is technically an incomplete metamorphosis. However, we do call this their larval stage. And the reason is because Glaucidia have to go through a host stage. They have to find a host. Those hosts are fish. Now, what they're going to do is these Glaucidia are going to be released, and they are hopefully going to clamp onto the gills of a fish. And it looks a little bit like this when they do. All right, so now how these Glaucidia get to the fish is where things get weird. This is really weird. If you are a generalist mussel, that means you can kind of attach to any fish. It doesn't really matter, okay? If you're a generalist, usually your strategy to get on a fish is to open up those Glaucidia packets, let all the Glaucidia go, and hopefully they'll come across a fish and grab on. Now, if you're a specialist, you are looking at 1, 2, maybe 3 fish that you can attach to. You gotta be a little bit more creative to get them onto the fish, and this is where things get really weird.
So one strategy to find a host is for mussels to make their Glaucidia packets look like a lure, or something a fish would like to eat. And it might look something like this. So a mussel might wag this lure, or leave it someplace that a fish can get to, like on a rock. And what happens is the fish will bump into the lure, it will break open the Glaucidia packet, and while the fish's mouth is open, the Glaucidia can get into the fish and pass through the mouth and into the gills and be able to attach to the gills. It might look something like this.
Right. Another way that a mussel could lure in a fish is by having an appendage on their body. Okay, so what I want you to do, I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to just count how many fish do you see in the picture. Right, how many of you counted this one as a fish? Not a fish. If you counted it as a fish, it's not a fish. But if you got tricked, that's okay. That's the whole point. Okay? This mussel in particular has an appendage that looks like a fish. Think about it. If you're a mussel, you're just kind of a rock. That's what it looks like, right? You've got this fish, and all these other little fish are kind of like, oh, this looks like a safe spot to hang out. There's another fish hanging out here. He seems safe. So they kind of start coming. Now, all those little fish hanging out in the spot, if a bigger fish comes by, right, they're gonna think, yes, lunch buffet. All right, so they're gonna come in, all the other little fish are gonna scatter, but our lure from our mussel is not. So it's gonna come at that, and as it bumps into that mussel, okay, those Glaucidia packets are gonna open up and go through the mouth and hopefully attach onto the gills.
Now they're on the fish's gills. So nothing needs to happen to the host, so hopefully they don't get caught or eaten by another fish. And when the Glaucidia is big enough, it will fall off into the substrate in the water. Here's the trick with that though. Some species are substrate specific, meaning they need the perfect conditions in order to grow bigger. So if they fall into the wrong substrate, they're not gonna make it. All right, so assuming that the female gets fertilized by the same species of mussel that she is, and the Glaucidia find the right host, the host doesn't get eaten, that it finds the right substrate to fall into, and then hopefully that it doesn't get eaten in the 12 years that it needs to mature to an adult, it can reproduce.
All right, so when you think about a mussel's life cycle, there is a huge amount of luck that goes into just becoming an adult. All those things contribute to not having an easy time getting to adulthood. But now even when you're an adult, you also are struggling a lot. Remember at the beginning we talked about how they're siphon feeders? They are sucking in water from the river, they are bringing it into their bodies, filtering out all that stuff. Now I want you to think about that. We put tons of chemicals into the river, some on purpose, some on not, okay? Even when we clean them, you think about like all of the pharmaceutical stuff that goes into our river just because we can't take it out. We have all those microplastics from like our, your face scrub and stuff like that. There's huge amounts of sediment that go in. All of that stuff is going into mussels' bodies. On top of that, we're also doing things like changing the course of the river. These animals like slow-moving rivers where they have lots of substrate. A lot of the Mississippi River, we have dug a channel that's super straight, super deep, no banks like this right here to make way for ships. So all of those things combined means that this group of animals is one of the most endangered groups of animals on the entire planet. Thankfully, we have been doing a lot, okay? There's so much stuff about water health, especially around the Mississippi, and in fact, our stretch of the Mississippi is one of the best habitats for mussels now, which is amazing. So, I hope you all will come someday to the Mississippi, maybe look for some of these creatures. You might find some shells on the shore, or like we did, you might find some in the river. Just be careful of them, and I hope you see just how cool these animals are. Thanks so much.